You know what old Jack Burton always says at a time like this?
Come on, then. I'll bite your legs off.
I can take it.
Great power comes great responsibility.
We have a fault. Get to the chopper! And to the flesh wound.
I am the father. In 1956, he first appeared on motion picture screens across the country. His impact on audiences was instantaneous and unprecedented. His acting technique was revolutionary. His presence overwhelming. He possessed more raw talent than any performer of his generation. He soon became an international legend, a giant who took the world by storm. Then, suddenly, at the height of his fame, he retired from motion pictures. Now, he is back, and he's more magnificent, more glamorous, more devastating than ever. Prepare yourself. The greatest star of all has returned. Godzilla 1985.
And welcome back to the 31st episode of the Monster Movie Stompdown. Of course, you got Sludge here, sitting across from me.
Is Mark.
Our brother from Texas.
Ruben?
And our very special guest.
Oh, RJ. Sorry.
Yeah. we planned these perfectly. So, which is awesome. Yes. So thank you. We do have RJ back with us, Ruben's son. Very excited. Had a blast with RJ on the last episode that he was on, and we're back for another Godzilla film this time. So RJ, thank you for taking time out of your day, because I know, you're super busy and probably had better things to do than
finals coming up. Yep.
Oh,
that's all right. It's my last week of undergrad ever, so
Oh, there you go. nothing major there. So
yeah, nothing big,
Yeah.
It's all right.
So I'm very excited about this episode because we've been doing this show for almost 2 years. Well, 2 years this July, actually, here in a couple months. And this is the one I've been looking forward to the most. So after this one, we're not doing Monster Movie Stompdown anymore. Just kidding. We're still doing it. But this is the one I'm most excited about. And, of course, it's a double feature because there is two versions of this film. But, of course, we are talking about Godzilla 1985, or in the original Japanese, 1984, but we're going to call it the Return of Godzilla to kind of separate the two of them. Super stoked. We get to see the return of Godzilla after a 10-year hiatus in the first of the Heisei series, technically, which we'll talk about again here in a minute. But super, super great film. We are all fans of it, apparently, other than RJ, but we'll get to that part too. So, it's going to be a repeat of Ship of Monsters, but, we got Mark 2.0 in the form of RJ in this episode. But really, really good film. So real quick before we jump too much, there's a lot to be said about this film, but let's get a synopsis out. Godzilla, of course, has been a 10-year hiatus since Terror of Mechagodzilla brought the King of the Monsters back in the movie that negated the entire Showa series. This is a direct sequel to the original 54 film. And in the movie, there's a volcanic explosion on the Daikoku Islands. And 3 months after the volcanic explosion, during a massive storm, the shipping boat Yohana with one of our main characters, Okamura, or in 85, his name is Ken for some whatever reason, is on this ship. And they're about to crash into Daikoku Island when out of the island comes Godzilla in a very quick, awesome intro sequence to the movie. And of course, kind of the same storyline of the first one. Godzilla ends up showing up in a couple times, and Japan has got to defend themselves against them. The only link is to the original film, none of the other ones. Got a lot of great characters in this. A lot of it centers around Goro Maki, who is the reporter. He's also the guy who ends up rescuing Okamura, or Ken, from the Yohana Maru, and then brings him back. And then it's kind of a cool government conspiracy of trying to keep it under wraps. But then Godzilla attacks a Russian nuclear sub and the Russians decide to blame the Americans and to stop war from happening. The Japanese finally decide to say, yes, Godzilla has returned. He is back. And they try to stop or prepare for his arrival because we know he's going to show up on Japan's shores. He ends up showing up, attacking a nuclear power plant, wiping it out of all radioactivity, and a flock of birds flies by, and this is the important part, and he ends up following it back out to sea. They end up developing a plan, 2 plans actually. The Japanese Defense Forces been working in secret on a special warplane, I guess you would call it, called the Super X, to defend the capital. They decide to load this super weapon up with cadmium missiles because cadmium interacts with radioactivity, hoping that it'll work good in negating Godzilla and knocking him out and killing him. Of course, it doesn't work. And then Professor Hayashida, one of the other main characters, along with Goro and Ken/Okamura and his sister Naoko, and another professor named Minami, are developing a device. When they find out when Godzilla leaves with the birds on his first attack, he has a migratory pattern that he follows. So they use the same frequency of the birds to try and lure Godzilla to a volcano on Oshima Island. And the plan is to detonate or cause a premature eruption to bury Godzilla in the volcano. So 2 plans to stop him. Obviously, Super X fails, but has a great fight sequence with Godzilla. And they end up luring him to Oshima Island, in which he is buried in the volcano, presumably dead, but according to Professor Hayashida, he's immortal and he can never die. Really, really good movie from start to finish. And again, these are very drastically different films. When The Return of Godzilla came out, actually, Tomoyuki Tanaka started writing this film back in 1980. And in that one, the Return of Godzilla version he originally wrote, he was going to fight another monster called Bagan, who was a shape-shifting monster. Super X was still in it, but had a much smaller role. But Godzilla returned and fought Bagan. Now, a lot of people may have heard, or some of you Godzilla fans that are listening, may have heard the name Bagan before. Bagan was the final boss monster in the Nintendo game Super Godzilla. He didn't make it for this film, but Tomoyuki Tanaka was such a fan of the character of the monster that he did end up making it into that video game. So for those familiar with the name, that's why you know it. But of course, after some reworks and some decisions, they decided to come up with this plot. They did keep in the 84 film the nuclear issue still heavy in the forefront. There's characters with the Russians and the Americans involved in this one kind of heavily. They do come to America or to come to Japan to talk to the prime minister, say, hey, look, we need to attack Godzilla with a nuclear weapon. Then when he shows up, you need to give us permission to attack him before he goes attacks anywhere else. And so the prime minister has to deal with that decision, in which he decides, no, it's not going to happen. Unfortunately, due to there's a Russian ship in the harbor in Tokyo Bay that has a control for one of their nuclear warheads that's on a satellite in outer space, gets destroyed, and the satellite or the nuclear warhead ends up shooting off. And so there's a nuclear warhead heading to Tokyo to detonate on Godzilla while Godzilla's destroying everything and fighting Super X. So the Americans come in to help out, and they end up shooting the nuclear warhead out of the sky. So it's very nuclear, big presence on the nuclear side again in this film, like the original one. So again, he started in 1980, ends up making the film and releasing finally in 1984. Now this, of course, special effects was done, I do want to mention this, by Teruyushi Nakano, who had taken over the reins from Eiji Tsuburaya back earlier in the Showa series. He claims this movie, and I agree with him too, it was his shining achievement in special effects, especially as a special effects director. This was also his last Godzilla film that he ever did. Not only did he direct the special effects for this, but for those who may not know, he also was the assistant director on the film itself. So he did shoot some other scenes for this movie other than just special effects, which I thought was pretty cool. For a way for him to go out, I thought it was cool that he got to do more than just that. Another thing special effects wise I want to talk about real quick is his assistant, who wasn't credited, and Ruben and RJ, I don't know if you guys know this, but you know who this guy is. Shinji Higuchi assisted Teruyushi Nakano in doing the special effects. And people are like, oh, who's that guy? If you've ever seen the 90s Gamera trilogy, that's the guy that did the special effects for those movies. Did you guys know that?
No, I did not. That's cool.
Yeah.
I did because we've done the Gamera films already. So that's how I knew.
I believe I've seen those all. Yeah, they were great. I love them.
Oh, phenomenal. So, I mean, that's how, I mean, he did, I think Higuchi's 90s Gamera films, as far as the special effects, are far superior to the 90s Godzilla films by a long shot.
Oh, wow.
I
Wow.
mean, the suits.
Like the special effects or the films in general.
I'd probably say both,
Here we
depending
go.
on the film.
Sorry.
Here we
Okay.
go.
Yeah. Depending on the film, I'm going to say both. But definitely special effects. I mean,
Oh,
the special
both.
effects in the 90s were great, but you can't argue that the Gamera suits, any of them, didn't look or operate better. I mean, the eyes, the mouth, everything looked more organic and fluid.
Yeah, honestly, you're kind of right, because I think the '90s Gamera movies look a lot more modern than the '90s Godzilla movies do. Now that I think about it,
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, I'm serving from memory here, and I think I've seen the Gamera's more recently. But I mean,
We-
Return of
we've done
Godzilla in
them
it is amazing. That's an awesome film.
Yeah, we've done the monster Stompdowns and all of these.
Yeah.
That came up. I do
Yeah.
recall that.
I forgot which one it is, but the one with the Gauss in the stadium, where there's like 3 of them. That one is good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was the first one, Guardian of the Universe. So,
Yes,
Um,
yeah, that one was great.
yeah. So, I mean,
Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Higuchi, I mean, that's where, I mean, the guy who gave us those films, special effects wise, this is the movie he started on, which is really cool. And it's got a great cast of people. There's a lot that went into this film. I mean, of course, Tomi Tanaka wrote the story. He produced it again. We got a new director with Koji Hashimoto, who I think did a great job on this one. The musical score was very interesting, very different because, of course, we're used to Akira Ifukube from back in the Showa eras and the originals. This one was done by Rajiro Koroku, and I think it was a phenomenal score. I mean, it's very, very different. We actually don't get a score like this in any of the other films because it kind of went back to the Showa type soundtrack and score, from here on out. But for this one, I thought was really, really, really good. Then of course it's got a great cast. I mean, Ken Tanaka plays Goromaki. Yasuki Natsuki plays Dr. Hayashida. And we've seen him before. He was actually in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. He played Shindo. And I do want to mention that the geologist Minami, Hayashida's friend, another scientist that helps him come up with a plan for the Oshima volcano, is Hiroshi Koizumi. He was also in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monsters. He was the Dr. Mirai, the scientist who was studying, ironically, the geologist who was studying the asteroid that Ghidorah was in. So he plays a geologist in both films. So it's kind of cool to see those two together. One of the other actors I really want to talk about is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, Kaiji Kobayashi. This is he's only been in 2 tokusatsu films, but now as far as like the old samurai films and stuff, he's done a lot of them. He was in Yojimbo and a few others, but he was actually in the original movie, The Three Treasures, which was remade in '94 by Toho under the name Yamato Takeru. So it's Three Treasures, I think, is a better film as far as the production, but that was a great tokusatsu film. That was his first one. I think that one came out in like maybe 61-ish, something like that. But then other than that, he didn't do anything else tokusatsu except for this film. But this dude has probably got the biggest acting record I've ever seen. According to IMDb, Kaiji Kobayashi, the Prime Minister in this movie, has 222 acting credits in his career. And that,
Wow.
that's impressive. I've seen like 104, and I'm like, man, they've done a lot, 222. Dude's a boss. Like, I don't know anybody that's acted in that many films. So, I mean, absolutely great cast, great movie. And of course, when this movie came out in Japan, this was the most successful Godzilla film since Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. The movie was made around 650 million yen. It ended up grossing a little over 1.7 billion yen. So it did extremely well in Japan. Obviously kickstarted a whole nother series of Godzilla films. And of course, as soon as the success started rolling in, Toho wanted to get this overseas. And first thing they did, call the American companies, man, because we did 56. They've always, American companies have always brought the Godzilla movies over, but they wanted to do this theatrically. Now, Toho originally was trying to sell this film for like $2 million for the rights to it, and nobody was buying. Nobody was picking it up. And because Godzilla had been gone for 10 years. And he was still big in the 80s, but he was big on TV, not the movie theaters. So $2 million was way too much of an asking price. Well, after all the big wigs turned him down, New World Pictures ended up coming to them and working a deal out. Toho kind of got screwed a little bit because they signed the rights or sold the rights for the film for $500,000. It's a big difference from the $2 million asking price. But New World goes through, and with the $500,000 they invest, they, of course, decide to rewrite the movie. And you've got Terry Randall, was one of the producers on this film. He's the guy, him and somebody else, I can't remember who else it was, or Tony Randall, I'm sorry. They rewrote the film. I can't remember her name, at least Lisa Tomei. And it was going to be more comedic, the American scenes. They wanted to be more comedic. And originally Raymond Burr, who's in the American 1985 film, wasn't even in the original script. And the actor that they wanted to get, I can't remember who it was, turned it down. But then Tony was like, oh, well, let's get Raymond Burr because he's a familiar face from the King of the Monsters film in 56. And Raymond was completely super excited about it. Was like, yeah, absolutely. So they signed him on to do the movie. They had, of course, the reworked script for the American scenes. And he showed up from my understanding is he showed up on set and pretty much laid the law down. Like the way I've heard it talked about is he came up and was like, here's the rules. Okay, I'm not memorizing any of my lines. You're going to give me a teleprompter because I'm going to do this live with the emotion, like he did with the Raymond or with the Matlock stuff. And so they had to do that. Yeah. And then he said, this is also not going to be a comedic film. Parts actually, Warren Kimmerling and James Hess agreed and like, no, we don't need any of this comedic stuff. You know, we need to pay homage and be serious. And Raymond Burr was like, absolutely not. Like, this is not going to happen. So they end up having to rewrite the script on set because of Raymond Burr and then getting backed by James and Warren. So what little comedic lines they had left that Raymond Burr was okay with all went to the Travis Swords character, who's in the movie you see is the guy, you know, always in front of Dr. Pepper or drinking a Dr. Pepper can. Okay. That's Travis Swords. So, and there was a reason for Dr. Pepper being in it. So Raymond came on and shot all of his scenes in one day in 8 hours. He said, that's it. It was a 3-day shot.
That's awesome.
3-day shoot for all the American scenes. The director had no choice. He ended up having to shoot all the back camera scenes and other, you know, characters the other 2 days because Raymond says, I'm working for 8 hours. We're doing it this way. This is how it's going to turn out, and go. And so that's what they did. And it, you know, and I think Raymond's scenes were phenomenal in it. But
I was about to say that makes me like him even less.
yeah. It's just, he just came down and was just like, this is it. This is how it's going to work. He's like, I'm the tie to the original Godzilla here in America. And he really was. And so they shot the films, but the American version changed a lot. You know, we were talking before we started the show. I think RJ, you brought it up. These two films are pretty much totally different films. And that's why we've got to take them both separately.
I mean, the synopsis you gave was pretty much the 84 Return of Godzilla.
Yeah.
Synopsis that you gave.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way to give the synopsis correctly. Because if you try to give the synopsis from the American Godzilla, you end up with a.
It's honestly kind of confusing. It's a confusing movie.
Yeah, it's very choppy. So I'm glad when you gave your synopsis, you did not give the American version of it. You know, like for an example, you said Godzilla's first appearance was to that boat. Well, in the American version, it's inferred that he showed up, but you really don't know.
Right.
You know, you don't even get a roar, if I'm correct. You don't even get a roar.
No, you do. You get a roar.
You don't get the roar. You don't get anything out of it. I'm like, you know, that ain't right. You know, that ain't right. And we talked, me and RJ were talking about it. I said, well, maybe they wanted to keep Godzilla's appearance to be more dramatic rather than that.
That was the plan.
A roar wouldn't have done too bad.
That was the plan. Because if you look at the two, and one of the things that's so drastically different about and I've got my own edited version of this movie, so I know probably better than most, unless they're just really paying attention. These scenes were so switched around. I mean, so many scenes were switched around and taken out and just removed. And I mean, timeline pieces are completely edited around. I mean, there's scenes at the beginning of Godzilla 85 that actually occurs more in the middle or later parts of 84. There's parts at the back end of 85 that's more at the beginning of 84. I mean, it's a smorgasbord. Okay. I mean, it's totally smorgasbord film, but there are things that they don't even want to mention Godzilla in the American version till
they finally have to say his name. Otherwise, they don't. Where in the 84 Return, immediately you know that was Godzilla.
Oh yeah, from the get go.
They talk about it and they go into that's one of the major differences. You know, and when we start talking about our likes and dislikes, I'll go more into that.
Yeah, but that was one of the plans that Randall had producing the. Because the director was R.J. Kaiser, and honestly, I don't know how much R.J. really did, because it all seemed to be a lot of Tony Randall's doing as far as his baby on this. Was keeping Godzilla's reveal big and huge. That's why in the 84 film, once Goro rescues Okamura, or #Kin in the American version, he's in the hospital, and Dr. Hayashida, or Professor Hayashida, comes and sees him, and that's where you first find out that they have a relation. They've known each other for a while, and why his sister works for Dr. Hayashida. But Dr. Hayashida hands Okamura a stack of photos, and they're photos of Godzilla from the 54. And there's a great sequence where he looks at one photo. I think it was from in front of the Daisuke building, and whatever it's called in the 54 film, and he just has this look of terror. That's not even in the American version. They took it out completely and I think it's for a good reason the way they handled it, because when Godzilla first appears, it is edited a little bit differently, sound-wise and effects-wise. So when you get that first full appearance, to me, it's a lot bigger in the American version, because, I mean, you know, that's just Americans. They try to do everything as big as possible in comparison to the 84 film. Now, of course, they took out 27 minutes, I think, of the Japanese version, and added roughly 10 minutes of American footage. So, I mean, even with the 10 minutes added back in, the American version is still drastically shorter than the original Japanese film. Plus, you get tons of Dr. Pepper. The reason being why you have so much Dr. Pepper, there was actually even 2 Dr. Pepper commercials made around this time with Godzilla in it to promote the film, is New World Pictures spent a total of $3.2 million for getting the rights to the film, hiring all the actors, shooting the new scenes, new soundtrack. But that's one thing too, is a lot of the soundtrack was changed too, because you've got a lot of the original 84 soundtrack in this, but you've also got a lot of soundtrack from the movie DEFCON 4 that was used for this movie, the American version as well. And we'll get into that too in our likes and dislikes, I'm sure. But so New World spent $3.2 million. This movie did 4.1 something million in the box office. So it was by no means a success, but it wasn't a flop. They made some money on it. But Dr. Pepper, they spent $10 million on a promotional ads for this film. $10 million. Yeah. That's huge. I'm sure they profited for it, because
all over TV. I remember those. It was man. It was the media blitz.
Oh yeah. I mean, Godzilla everywhere. And that's why when you see the American scenes, the first time you see the general and the Travis Swords character walking down the hallways, I mean, that's like, it's almost like the camera's not even focused on them. It's focused on the Dr. Pepper machine behind them. And then there's this really not needed scene where you see it pan across all the American characters, and Travis Swords' character just kind of brings up this Dr. Pepper can to make sure you can see it and takes a sip of it, you know?
Takes a sip. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So they had to drop Dr. Pepper everywhere in the movie, everywhere. Now, of course, obviously, not a huge success. Got terrible reviews when it first came out here in America. I mean, Roger Ebert, I think, gave it a 1 star. Gave it next to nothing. But they saw a quick change in this movie when it hit home release, because once it hit home release, the movie got cult status because it became one of the most sought after Godzilla films. And unfortunately, it's been in just legal mumbo jumbo rights issues for decades. So, I mean, we never got anything on this film. It was released on VHS a couple times and then on Laserdisc, but there was never a DVD release of this movie, official DVD release of the movie. You can get a bootleg copy of it on eBay, nor is there a Blu-ray, because it's just been because when Kraken put out the Return of Godzilla, the Japanese version, on Blu-ray a year or two ago, they were trying to get the rights to 85 to put it on the Blu-ray as well. But they could not. It was just too much of a hassle, and money was just too much, so they decided not to do it. But like I said, theatrically, 84 or the Return of Godzilla did absolutely awesome. Kickstarted the new Godzilla series. 85, not so good in theaters after everything they did to the film, but became huge when it comes to home media. It really is to this day the most sought after Godzilla film on newer formats because people can't get it and people want it. You'll see on Godzilla fan groups all the time people talking about this film being their first, or ones they try to find the most, but it's just so hard to find outside of VHS. So it's kind of given it a bit of a cult status. So some really cool things to it. Let's go ahead and get through what we liked and didn't like about the film. There's still more stuff, that I could probably talk about this film. When it comes especially to the licensing, we've got sitting here at the table, I've got the 6-inch and the 12-inch Imperial Godzilla figures. If you watch the last Sludge's stash video, the Imperial Godzilla I brought up in it, but I've got the 6 and the 12-inch. The only one I'm missing is the 10. There's 3 of them. We've got the NECA 84 on the table. We've got the X Plus 25 centimeter 84 figure on the table. We've got every VHS release of 85 on the table, from the New World all the way through to all of Anchor Bay's releases. We've got the Kraken 84 Blu-ray. We've got my DVD edited version of the film. And then we've also got a really cool thing here on our table that I love this film is the Dark Horse in the 80s did a manga comic adaptation of the entire film in 6 issues. And I've got the trade paperback of that sitting here on the table as well. So I'm a big fan. of both films.
I couldn't tell.
Oh yeah. So let's go through. Let's talk about the things we liked, didn't like. Ruben, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. And I'm trying to figure out how to structure this. I'm going to go with the American first because I disliked more about that than I did about the Return. Matter of fact, I'll start with the Return. There's less to say about it. I think it's I like the movie. I like it a lot. Matter of fact, when we did our top Godzilla movies, that was number 2. And it's actually Return. We didn't separate them at the time, but it's Godzilla. Return of Godzilla is by far a far superior film than 85. It was very well made. I thought the special effects were great, awesome compared to other films of that same time. We can get into the Gamera thing, but this one pretty much started it all. I think without this movie, maybe if it wouldn't have done so well, who knows if Gamera would even attempted to make the Gamera films.
Right.
Had this one not been successful. I think this one said, hey, you know what? We can do this and we can be successful with it.
Yeah, well,
I like the soundtrack on it.
It kickstarted a lot of other monster movies. Sorry, I didn't interrupt. This one really started. If it wasn't for this, we wouldn't have even gotten. It took years for it to come out because of a lot of crazy stuff. But the North Korean film Pulgasari, they decided to do it because of this film. You've got, Gunhead. More than just the Godzilla films. You got Gunhead coming out. You've got Yamato Takeru coming out. You've got all these other tokusatsu films. There's a resurgence that happened. And so, Ruben, yeah, you're absolutely right. If it wasn't for this film, I don't think we would have gotten a Gamera resurgence either. Because this
exactly. This one proved that first of all, that Godzilla still had the star power. And second, that these kind of films could be successful even in an era where, it was kind of like me and RJ were talking about it. It was kind of an era of excess. It was like, and that's in the movie. I'm going to let RJ talk about that a little bit, but that's in the movie too. I thought it was acted pretty well. Like I said, special effects were good. I like the soundtrack. I even dig that little quirky song that they have there at the end versus the American, which doesn't have that song in it.
Goodbye, Godzilla.
Yeah, Goodbye, Godzilla.
Yep,
There you go.
Yep.
I think 84, and it's hard to compare it because, once you compare that with 85, you realize how superior Return of Godzilla was, or Godzilla 84 was. And it's hard to judge because you're comparing it to 85. You're not comparing it standalone. I love the suit design, Godzilla's suit design, especially his eyes. I like the way they designed his facial features, pretty much, not just his eyes, but his facial features were great. The only thing I didn't like about Return is I thought the acting. You mentioned the acting was great. I thought it was all right. I thought some of the scenes were I thought could have been acted better. And I think that hobo was useless in that whole story.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was there for that was the comedic relief of Return of Godzilla, was that hobo. That's about it.
And it was like two scenes.
You know,
yeah.
Yeah, and he's in 2 scenes, and 3 if you count where he helps him down.
Oh yeah,
He helps him down that deal. So yeah, I like this. And, you know, to clarify, I like the suit design. I like the special effects. The miniatures were great. I like the facial features of Godzilla. I like that they went more back to a menacing type face than anything else. Versus, you know, now we don't have the hero Godzilla anymore. We're back to where we started in 54. Yeah, we're back to where we started in 54, where Godzilla is a force of nature and he's going to just walk right through you and he doesn't care. You know, he just does not. He's going to go get what he wants, which is he's looking at what they infer is food, you know. So that's that he's going to go eat radiation, or you know, he's going to absorb the radiation. So all in all, Return, the only thing I don't like about it is maybe the acting could have been better, and that hobo kind of bothered me. Now, as far as Godzilla 85, that movie compared to Return, I'm going to say what I didn't like about it, so like that I can get to, because, you know, even though it's the same movie just re-edited, it's really 2 different movies, and the American version is way too choppy, doesn't explain, you know, it just goes right into stuff, and you're like, what just happened? And you're trying to figure out what happened. Now they do it in a way that you don't pay attention, but if you watch Return, you realize that it's very important, and they left out a very important stuff. And one of the best scenes that I really thought was so cool, and they cut it out of the American version, was when Godzilla is in the city, and I believe it's right after its first encounter with the Super X, and he's going between buildings. It might have been after the battle. He's going between buildings, and you see his reflection in one of the buildings.
Oh, that was before the Super
You
X.
see his entire reflection. Yeah, and that is one of the coolest scenes in the whole movie.
Yep.
And Tony Randall, not the guy from The Odd Couple, but he decided decided that wasn't a cool scene. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's one of the coolest scenes.
Yeah,
I actually prefer. Go ahead.
All you get in the American version is where he actually ends up like kind of sticking his arm out and just tearing apart that building. You miss the whole beginning section of his reflection and seeing it. Yeah, that was really cool.
That was a really cool scene, and I have no idea. I cannot think, if you're sitting in that director's chair, I cannot think of a reason why you would say, you know what? That's useless. Let me get rid of it. Let me put a guy drinking a Dr. Pepper instead.
Yeah.
I just can't. I mean, I mean, really? Come on, man. And I thought 85 was choppy enough to be distracting. That's what I thought about it. I don't like the soundtrack as much as I like the original soundtrack. In fact, I'm disappointed on both films not having the Godzilla March or the Godzilla theme on either one. But if you watch the trailer, if you watch the trailer for it, the Japanese trailer for it, they use that music in the trailer.
Yes, they did.
And I'm like, why did you not use it in the movie? I have no idea why.
They did it just for you, Ruben. Just for you.
Yeah, I mean, they just said, you know what? We're going to teach this guy a lesson. You know, and they took it out. I'm like, man, I cannot believe it. And then you watch I watched the trailer because it's part of the crack. If you watch the Kraken Return, one of the special features is it has a Japanese trailer in there.
Yeah.
And it's an extended trailer. It's about, at least 3 minutes long. And that march is in there. And there's even scenes in there like they should have kept that. They should have put that in the movie. So that's what I didn't like about the 85 Godzilla. I thought they chopped it up too much. I think Return was not meant to be a comedic movie. And when the Americans got a hold of it, they decided because it was still comedic. Raymond Burr said, don't make it comedic, but it was still comedic. I mean, that guy, I just wanted to
Travis Swords, yeah. It's like every line
I
had to
just
be a
wanted-
joke
I
that he
just-
put out.
That guy was just so annoying. I mean, the Dr. Pepper is distracting, but that guy was just annoying, you know. And I'm like, really? You know, this is. They tried to make it something it's not.
Yeah.
And that's disappointing. But that said, you know, the American Godzilla is the one that the first one I saw. You know, not the first Godzilla movie, but the first version of the movie that I saw of Godzilla. And its Return, that was the one I saw. That was the one that was on TV all the time. That was the one that was on a VHS. I didn't get to see Return of Godzilla until it came out on this Blu-ray. I never experienced it. You know, I've always had the VHSs, and that's all I ever had. If I wanted to watch Godzilla 85, it was going to be on a VHS. That was the way it was going to be. And so, as far as that goes, I mean, the special effects are the same. They did take out some stuff that they thought, I guess, you know, like like that foot. You know, that the robotic foot, I guess.
Oh, yes.
Or whatever.
Well,
it is that
the
they did.
foot
Yeah,
was
they didn't-
life size. That was actual 2-scale foot they used in 84.
Yeah, life size foot in the American version, they took that out. I guess they thought it was too fake looking, which they're not wrong. It was not wrong. It was
Right.
not very realistic, and so they weren't wrong about that.
I think that was a
But-
plus as far as the editing. Like if you're going to take some things out of 84,
exactly. As far as what
Yeah.
I like, that was that you know, that's 1 point for the American version.
Yeah.
And you know, another plus is it was good to see Steve Martin back, although they didn't call him Steve Martin because of the comedian.
yeah, they had to
But
cut
it
it
was
to
good
just
see
Mr.
Steve
Martin.
It was cool
Yeah.
to see Steve Martin back. I like that. I like that they included that. I thought that was a nice throwback to 54. You know, I just wish they would have stuck to that 54 formula that Return did. Return stick to that 54 formula, and I think that's why it was successful.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you know, back in 85, you know, the American audience maybe was looking for comedy, you know. 85 is, you know, that's isn't that the era of Ghostbusters and all these comedies that were
Oh, yeah.
out and about around 85. So it could be that the studio said, you know, we need to make it comedic or nobody's going to watch it. Nobody wants to go see a serious monster movie, which I think they were wrong because there was plenty of good, serious monster movies out back then. But I think they gambled on that, and I think that cost them. But I mean, I like 85. It's one of my favorites. You know, the special effect, just like Return, you know, all the things I liked about Return, I also liked about 85. I just had I just came back, especially after watching both of them back to back. I realized Toho made a movie, and the Americans tried to make it something that it was not, and that took away from the distraction. After watching them back to back, I realized 84 is a superior movie to 85. And I think that's about it, man. I hope I wasn't too negative on 85. I didn't mean to be, because I really enjoyed the film, and I really think it's very nostalgic for me. So I don't. If it sounds like I'm going too negative, don't take me too seriously, because
It's just
I
because
really do love. The
yeah, RJ's got
Yeah.
you held hostage over. That's what it is.
film. Well, that's my say of the matter.
All right. Well, let's mix it up a little bit. So instead of jumping to RJ, let's get Mark. Let's get the two older guys out of the way for the young bloods come in
Yeah, there
afterwards.
you go.
Well,
Yeah, I'd
you're
like to hear what Mark has to say anyway, because we both probably saw the movie around the same time.
well. Actually, the Return at 84, I just watched for the first time, and
And you watched,
So
yeah,
you're
'cause
Yes.
we watched the
just like
Japanese
me,
one,
then. Yeah.
but you
Yes.
watched the English
It was
dub
dubbed,
version, because there is an
yes,
international dub
yes,
version of
yes,
it.
I did. And so I started out, turned you on just this, as a young age to 1985. That was the movie that I watched the most of, and it'll reflect in my stomps, and you'll see being Mr. Martin coming back to the scene. I thought was fantastic, to bring in the original, and which I felt like I liked the 85 better than I did the 84. That was just for me. I did, overall, I think the movies are pretty. I keep hearing two different movies, but in the same tone, they're pretty close to the same movies, in my opinion. Didn't see anything on either movie I didn't like. I thought they were great. This, to me, until I'll call it modern day Godzilla came out in 2014, this was my favorite Godzilla. I loved the suit. I loved the way he looked. I thought everything was just perfect. And that's probably why I was so into, hey, Chase, you gotta check out this movie. You gotta check out this movie. And and little did I know what it was going to do to you.
Oh, dude, we watch this thing daily.
Oh yeah, it was phenomenal. That was one of the things that, as far as you growing up and me being your father growing up with you, was spectacular. I thought that we had in common this giant creature from Japan. So I mean, overall, mine's short and sweet. Godzilla 1985 to me was my favorite Godzilla movie for a long time, and just that it connected with the original, I felt like was spectacular. No negatives on it especially, and definitely none on the 1984. Now that I've watched it, I thought it was very good. I thought I liked the acting, thought it was good. Yes, the comedic parts of 1985 were more corny and stupid than they were.
Travis Swords, the only problem.
But I didn't even see him as just. It was kind of like he said his part. Now let's keep moving on in the movie and enjoying it. But I think overall both movies, fantastic movies, and really what gave me a resurgence for liking the series and pushing it to you. Growing up, and I thought it was fantastic. So.
Well, definitely. I mean, like sitting here, and we'll jump to RJ in here in a second. I mean, at the table that we've got, of course, we've got a table we sit and do the podcast at on our side in our studio. I mean, like I said, I called off all this memorabilia. The New World Pictures VHS tape that's here on the table is the same one that Mark bought me for Christmas. So, I mean, it is literally the copy I got as a child that has been well worn out. I mean, the case, honestly, for this little story behind it is I lost the actual case years ago. And still had the VHS. I'm trying to get it out of the box here. Still had the VHS, but I put it in a clamshell case and lost the actual VHS case. Now, if you were able to see it here, Mark can test it. There's no label.
The label
is worn off. Like, this thing is in rough shape. All you can see is the actual print of Godzilla 85 that was underneath the label. But my very dear friend Sarge from the protest band I was in knew how much this movie meant to me because it's my favorite Godzilla film. He's a big Godzilla fan. For my birthday one year, several years ago, he hunted down and bought this clamshell, which is the original New World Pictures or case, not the clamshell, to replace for mine. So I mean, the case is still original case, but came from Sarge because mine was gone. But that's my original VHS, and if I'm not mistaken, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, with that Christmas came the 12-inch Imperial Godzilla, 85 Godzilla. So, I mean, this is the beginning for me. This is where it all started. So
that was back in the home stretch.
Oh yeah. So, brother Ruben
started
or RJ, let's hear. And we heard what Mark said and what Ruben said. I want to hear your take. I'm very, very interested to hear this because this is going to get interesting.
Let's see. So before I start, I like Godzilla. Okay.
See. Okay.
But it doesn't mean I can't be critical of stuff. For example, okay, Def Heaven is my favorite band, but I wasn't a fan of their latest album. Will I jam it if it's on? Do I own it on vinyl? Yes. But I have no problem saying it's my least favorite album. So that's kind of the same thing here. I'm not saying this is my least favorite Godzilla movie. I'm not sure. I'd have to watch all of them again to confirm that. But if I'm honest, I feel like this is I kind of came to this one. I feel like this is my first time really, because the only thing I remember when watching it was literally the very first scene and the very last scene. So the beginning and Godzilla's death were the only thing I remembered from this film before coming in to watch it again the 2 nights ago or whatever. Okay. I have a list here. So
oh man. Let me break out my Star Wars Episode 3 list real quick, just so we get prepared for that.
I'd be down to hear it. But okay, so first plus I put, and this applies to both of them, both 84 and Return, was Godzilla, of course.
Okay.
I did like Godzilla. I liked his design. I thought he was pretty awesome. But it also made a negative list because I know my dad said he liked his eyes. I did not like his eyes because several scenes he looked so derpy. I mean, some of them like his eyes were facing into. I don't think that's.
You're talking.
That's the fault of the.
Well, and just so because
What's
we
up?
forgot to mention this, so everyone knows, there's Ken Pachiro Satsuma, the guy who played Gigan, Hedorah, and the Showa. He took over as Godzilla in this movie. So majority of the film, you actually have the suit, and that's the one that RJ is referring to, the derpy eyes. But then you also have a lot of scenes done by what they call the Cyborg, which was a 18-foot, fully mechanical, fully functioning Godzilla robot. So some scenes that were more articulate in the face and the eyes moving.
He saw two different designs.
Yeah.
He said that. He thought I saw two. Is there two different designs? That it looks like a different Godzilla. That's what he told me.
Yeah, no. So one of them is Ken Pachiro in the suit, and that's the one that you're referring to as the derpy eyes. And then there's the Cybot. I call it Cyborg. So sorry, it's Cybot is what they called it, which was the 18-foot robot. And that was the one that had, when you're looking at the design, had a little more rounded snout. And then of course the little bit longer fangs was the Cybot version. So yeah, go ahead. Anyways, derpy eyes.
Yeah. So, like I said, there was just not all scenes. Some scenes, like, I mean, honestly, like Godzilla looked bad at, like, sorry, no swearing, but like, as bad as he could. You know what I mean? Like there were some scenes where he just looked menacing and terrifying, but then there were other scenes where I honestly felt like it could have been fixed with different angles. But I mean, I know that, they want to show off everything. So that was a lack for me. I would be unimmersed at some points because I would kind of see his eyes and I'd be like, he kind of looks like, I don't know, like he needs some help or something, but so that is a plus and a negative, I guess. I guess I'll continue with let's see. Okay, plus on both. Definitely special effects. Special effects were great. I did note that mentally when watching it and writing it down right now. The special effects were awesome. I thought Godzilla's atomic breath was amazing in this one.
Oh yeah.
I think it was some of the coolest. And like I said, I this is how new it was to me. I was curious to see what color it was going to be at the time because sometimes it's the fire orange, sometimes it's the atomic blue. So like I said, I didn't have a lot of memory of this. I must have seen it when I was little, and that must have been the last time. But so special effects are great. From the last episode on Terror of Mechagodzilla, I'm a sucker for miniatures, good or bad. I think they're just so cool, and the miniatures in this one were awesome, I thought. And
I gotta
let's
agree,
see, for
especially the planes. The planes, I felt the miniature planes were so good in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought, and I loved it. I loved all the scenes that took place, on the street when it showed Godzilla doing stuff and destroying buildings. Yeah, that was awesome. Let's see, and I'm gonna save the another one. Okay, so going to negatives again. Inconsistent Godzilla scale at certain points. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen this movie a bunch of times, Sludge, but basically, so at the very first, like, obviously Godzilla's huge, but I guess 80 meters, I believe, in this one.
Yes, he was 80 meters.
But in the very first scene, he appears to that guy. I think he's just a random, like, soldier or citizen or whatever. It looks like when Godzilla's in front of him and they show it from, his perspective, it looks like if that guy was to get up, he would be up to his knee. But then in the next scene, he's like twice the, 3 times the size of that power plant. Yeah. So
right.
I think that maybe is the robot and then the suit difference, I would assume.
Or blue screen.
And that happened at several points. It's another scene with his foot where it looks like, his foot is the length of a character's arm. But then the next scene, he's in front of all those people and his foot's huge. So it's just the inconsistent Godzilla scale kind of took me out of the enjoyment / out of the immersion for a bit. But yeah, next negative I had was, my dad mentioned it, but lack of original Godzilla theme. Not really sure what the case was for that. I mean, we watched the American version first, and I was like, oh, maybe they just, they didn't do it because of that. But then we watched, Return, and it was the same thing. And I thought that was an interesting choice. I don't know. I feel like just the Godzilla theme is, I guess in a way it's kind of cheating. It instantly makes a film feel like a Godzilla film. Because I remember, being disappointed with Godzilla 2014 not having it, and obviously we were blessed with it amazingly in King of the Monsters, which, yeah. But,
oh man, when it drops in that one, it is epic in King of the Monsters.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, oh my gosh. But yeah, anyway, so I feel like lack of an original Godzilla theme, maybe it would have, as surprising and superficial as it sounds, maybe it would have made me have a little bit more sympathy towards the film, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know. It just felt like it lacked something. When it's not there, it feels like something's lacking. That's always in a Godzilla film. That's always in a Godzilla film. Yeah. So it was just an interesting choice. Negative, I put Steve Martin. I cannot stand his character, dude. I didn't like him. I did not like him in the original, and I didn't like him this time. I love the original's fantastic. Obviously, 54 is amazing. I don't like that they added his character in the American. I feel like they just do it to make it American. You know what I mean? And I'm not a big fan of that.
Right.
And in this one, I just felt like he came and just to stand there and sound like he knew what he was talking about, and then that was it. And you know what I mean? And like I said, the fact that you said that he went in there and filmed his scenes in 8 hours makes total sense because it seems like that's what it was. You know what I mean? I was like, dude, why? Like, and unfortunately, I wasn't a fan of really any of the American scenes in it. Like I said, they were comedic, which obviously, don't want to have any fun or anything, but like, it was just like, it didn't work with the other scenes in the film that well, I thought. Mm-hmm. So Steve Martin, Raymond Burr, not a big fan. I'm sorry. That's, I don't know. I mean, I have a little less like compassion for that because it's not Godzilla related. I feel like it's just a character. So I'm not a big fan.
But
as well as
at the same time,
sorry,
Darth Vader going no, totally works.
I love it. It gets me every time. And I'm not even being funny. Like, I love that scene so much. But anyway,
I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there. Had to.
Okay, and then one more. I got one more negative. And then I'll go to the positives, which are I would say does a good number for the film in my opinion. But last negative, which was already touched on, is that some of the cool American scenes are moved. Like my dad said, that scene where Godzilla's just, doing his thing, in the city, and where you see him in the reflective, it's just in that reflective building. It's so simple. Yeah, and that subway scene was cut out too. There was just some cool Godzilla scenes that were cut out. I'm not even talking about like the human sides of the story, but there was just some cool Godzilla scenes. I was like, man, like that could have been better.
One of my favorite ones that was removed is, if you recall, when he first shows up in the beginning of the film, or not the very beginning, but the nuclear power plant, when they're in the bunker where the prime minister is, on the screen, they see him and he does a roar. But if you watch, he does that classic almost Showa, like a picture that kind of rears back and kind of roars up at the sky and pulls his arms out. Like that is such that was the classic Godzilla, pose from the 70s. Totally not in the American version. That's a disappointment for me. I won't disagree with that. So, and
I forgot to mention that subway that when he picks up that subway, the American version is very lacking versus the Return. That was I'm even trying to remember what it was. The difference was off the top of my head, but I just remember thinking, man, why did they take this out? They shouldn't have taken it out.
Yeah.
Because it's extended in the Return. In the American, he picks up the subway train, he looks inside, and then he just throws it down.
Yeah, it's much longer in Return.
Yeah, in the Return, he not only picks it up, and he I'm trying to remember what it is that he does, but it's for some reason it just escapes my mind. But it's a totally in Return, it's in there. In the American version, they took it out, so I had forgotten all about that. And apparently, I still can't remember.
Basically, those are kind of my negatives. And I'll go to the positives that I mentioned. So I already mentioned the Godzilla design and the special effects were great. Next thing that I would add as a plus is the setting. And obviously I know it's not much different than, in theory, because it's just, it's Tokyo, correct? Or is it not Tokyo? Okay, I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Okay, cool. It's Tokyo, but it's Tokyo in the 80s. And it's so cool. Like, I don't know. Honestly, I wish they would show more. Like, because Sony in the 80s was popping. Like, I mean, obviously I wasn't there and I wasn't even here in the 80s. But like, just in general, like, I like that whole, like, consumerism, lights everywhere.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I have a sort of, like, false nostalgia for that stuff.
Well, what about, like, the big news screen TV, that's outside?
Yeah.
Love that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, like, I don't know if this makes sense, but I kind of thought it, and I didn't even tell you, but the whole movie, like the buildings that they're in, all that, it kind of has to me like a Resident Evil 2 vibe to me. And I know that came out like 98, but
I can
like
see
it just
that,
has
though.
a very like, it has a very like desperate zombie type feel going. I don't know. There's something it kind of is like it's a very what's the word? Like I'm thinking it's kind of gloomy. It's kind of a gloomy film. I feel like so that's why I feel like with the comedic scenes it doesn't work, because the film is gloomy. It's about like they're fighting over like the use of nuclear weapons and stuff. You know what I mean? And then Godzilla's like terrifying in this one. And there's like they have the Super X shooting stuff at it. You know, it just feels like it's very, very gloomy. Which I guess directly leads into my last positive point, which is honestly, I think is kind of like this is gonna sound like bad, not the saving grace, kind of like it's the Darth Maul to the Phantom Menace, in my opinion. Is the ending. The ending of this movie is amazingly beautiful. Like the whole it's almost, I love it because it's a really deep ending. I feel like honestly, like I said, I was not that much of a fan of the story. I felt like it lacked a lot of depth. But the ending has a lot of depth, I feel, in both of them. I feel in both 85 and in both
absolutely.
Return and 84. So, like, it's weird because the whole film, they're, like, dead set on getting this dude, Godzilla being this dude, out of the city. They're like, he's terrible. Like, he's back. Like, how dare they? Like, or how dare he come back? All this stuff, right? And then they finally get him to fall into the volcano. And, you know, it's sad. Like, Godzilla's falling into the volcano. The sad music's playing. He's roaring his last roar, you know, and the Prime Minister of Japan wants to cry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, dang, like that's it. I was honestly touched by it. Like I kind of, the first time, it was actually I feel like it affected me more in the American one, maybe because it was just the first one we watched, but it was just like,
and there was a speech going on.
Yeah, and there was also a speech that was going on.
You can't say you don't like, can't say you like Raymond Burr with that amazing speech at the end of the movie.
Yeah, like that. Okay, I'll give him that. I'll give his character that. That was pretty good. But I also did, to be fair, I also liked the way the Japanese one ended, just like that. No speech.
Right.
Just the credits start rolling after Godzilla's burning alive in that volcano. You know what I mean? So honestly, like I'll end it on a positive note. There were a lot of things I did not like, but that ending was awesome. Like I love that ending. Like that'll probably be one of my favorite Godzilla movie endings. Like if I had to, you know, if we ever make a list of our favorite Godzilla movie endings, that one would be up there, because that one it was just beautiful. It's tragic and it's beautiful, and it's almost like they're kind of like, dang, you know, was this a good thing we did, or was it not? You know, does this say more about us, or does this say more about Godzilla? So
I do completely agree with you on that one. I mean that this one, we've compared it a lot to King of the Monsters. Because it's right up there with it. The new 2019 one. I mean, I don't think there's a better ending to a Godzilla film other than this one, aside from maybe the new King of the Monsters. Like, of course, they're totally polar opposites in the way those movies ended. But this movie, super, just moving and tragic. So
that was pretty impressive at RJ. That's
he broke it down really well.
Yeah, that was no ship of monsters. Now he broke
Mark
it
was
down.
just like, this movie sucks.
I'm impressed. I like that.
So I liked having that polar side of it. Someone who didn't like it as much, which was cool. Thank you, RJ, for that. Definitely.
I didn't get a thank you at Ship of the Monsters, so you did good. You did
Mark.
good. I got trashed, man. They just beat me down. That's all they did.
So I mean, for me, for this one, I mean, 85 is my number one. I mean, King of the Monsters new one came pretty close to knocking it down, but after watching both of them multiple, I think I'm around the 50, 60 mark on King of the Monsters now, viewings. You know, after seeing it so many times, 85 still holds the trophy, you know, for me. As far as both films, at the core, the same movie. Edited wise, just drastically different. This movie obviously is where it started it all for me. Big time. I mean, I remember watching the original one with you as a kid, younger than that, but this was it. This is what cemented me as a Godzilla fanatic, and I've watched it more than any other film. Not just any other Godzilla film. I've watched this movie more than any other film, period. I mean, we're talking, in all honesty, numbers wise, we're not talking like I've seen it 100 times. We're talking like I've probably seen this movie 400 times. I mean, it's, dude, I mean, like when I go to bed, now, normally, I mean, right now, my wife's foot's broke and she couldn't have any weight on it, and I've been sleeping on the couch because I don't want to hit her foot. I mean, because she was in so much pain for like since February. You know what I mean? So when it's just me, or if I get up and I'm restless, I got to have a movie to put on, or I fall asleep to a movie. 9 times out of 10, this is the movie that goes on. Like if it's not this one, it's Gamera 2. But this is the movie that I fall asleep to a lot. So I absolutely love 85 more than 84. I think what flaws 85 has, Travis Swords is really it. I equate that to the flaw that 84 has, the giant foot that just looks out of place. The to scale Godzilla foot. Yeah. That was my major issue with that one. The only other issue I had with 84, the Return Japanese version, honestly, was not the pacing of the film, because the pacing of the film is freaking spectacular. The movie is phenomenal. There's a lot of 84 that makes 84 a superior film to Godzilla 85, but then I think there's things in 85 that makes it superior to 84. 84's issue, other than the foot, which I'll forgive because I'll forgive Travis Swords in the 85 movie, is the soundtrack. I didn't think was bad or lacking, except for there was a lot of scenes where there just was no soundtrack, and it would just be kind of long, true. And where the scenes are supposed to be kind of drawn out, you want that, and you can sell that and make it good. And that long drawn out process of a film, what makes those scenes, I think of Audition by Takashi Miike. Audition is extremely drawn out. Like that movie is almost impossible to sit through if it wasn't for the soundtrack of the movie. And some scenes is literally just like a minor note on a violin or a key. I mean, it's something that's just there to keep the ambiance going for that longer scene. And they didn't have that in 84. That was a problem for me, because in the Japanese version, because there was a great scene and I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. But then like very quickly I got shut off because there's nothing there. There's no sound effects. There's no, soundtrack. So that was my biggest beef, more so than the foot with 84, was just that. But I mean, if I take those things around, everything that we've talked about, I mean, the special effects are absolutely superb. You have miniature work on this that you have not seen since the original film. I mean, the miniatures in this are far superior to anything else other than the original film. The weaponry, the airplanes, the tanks are so much better looking than any Godzilla film, prior or post, when it comes to the Japanese films, in my opinion, other than Shin Godzilla. I mean, the rest of the Heisei series, they went back to the fake stuff. I mean, the miniatures didn't look good, as they were more, the more tokusatsu or special effects, planes and tanks, maser tanks that just weren't real. But this one, they used real things, and they made sure that the planes looked real, like you would really see. That was one of the things I like about the Gamera trilogy in the 90s is unless they absolutely could not use a real-life tank or a real-life jet, that's when they do the miniatures. But they would do the miniatures as highly detailed as possible. And I felt like they did the same thing with this film. Both sides, that's because the same special effects both, is they would use an actual vehicle unless they couldn't. And then if they couldn't use an actual vehicle or jet, they made the absolute best ones they could possibly make. And it was superb for that. Godzilla is just, he is terrifying in this movie. He is a true menace and just a natural destruction. And I love that. I mean, there's sometimes in the film, both sides, where there's not even really a personality to him. He's just a moving force.
Yeah.
And
that's absolutely true.
And that's terrifying in and of itself. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying. What I like so much about the 85 version, so much more than the 84, and I can't remember if it was Ruben or RJ, you guys said something about, and maybe it's Ruben, the 80s, it was the abundance of excess. I mean, we really wanted all the consumerism. I mean, everything was in excess. And I feel like 85 definitely captured that, because it was edited like an American film like none other. I mean, it was fast paced. There's no slowdown time. I felt like the parts that they did take out some amazing Godzilla sequences, but some things that they took out, I felt benefited the film. When you look at when Maki goes onto the Yahata Maru, the ship at the beginning, and he runs into and sees the sea louse, the Shokiru, the thing that ends up killing the crew. Which, by the way, let's definitely talk about the special effects of the dead crew members, because that was absolutely amazing.
Yes.
I mean, seeing those dead bodies just drained of blood. I mean, superb special effects. I mean, hats off again to Teruyushi Nakano for that. But in the 84 version, that when the Shokiru attacks Maki, the 84 version, it's too much drawn out on the Shokiru. Like, you see it a lot, and the more you look at it, the more it just doesn't look 100% believable. Where in the 85, they drastically shortened it, made it much quicker paced, and it was a much more intense scene. It was much more of a horror film. I mean, the whole movie in general is much more of a horror film.
Right. I think RJ mentioned seeing the string on the 84, where you don't see it on the 85.
Oh, yeah. You don't even see, like, the tail piece as an American audience. The tail of this sea louse is very weird and bulbous and, like, just odd. And just doesn't look real. You don't even see it at all in 85 because they edited the scene out that didn't have it in there. And I mean, they changed the way it sounded. I mean, there's a lot of things that they changed in this film that I feel made it better. When you look at the fight sequence between Godzilla and the Japanese Defense Force when he first finally makes land in Tokyo Bay, it is way more intense. Even though it's the same footage, it's way more intense in the 85 version and action-packed than it is in the 84 because the choppy, fast-paced editing. But then also the soundtrack was changed. The sound effects were changed. You know, adding the DEFCON 4 stuff. You know, I mean, it was way more. I mean, when I see it in 84, it's still great. I absolutely love it. But I don't feel it's like as.
It's not on a grand scale like it was in the 85 version. It's a grander.
Oh yeah, because it's like, I mean, when it starts, man, when he first raises up and they go to town, I mean, it's like all hell breaks loose. It really is. And I love that about 85 when I go back and watch them. It's like, that's one of my favorite things. And I mean, even the sound effect changes when the missiles hit the water and explode, so much bigger. I mean, it's excess, like RJ was saying. I mean, everything in this film was redone in excess. And I think it benefited a lot from it. Like I said, there's some issues that I have because I know them both so well that I'm like, okay, come on, really. And that's really just the way it's reorganized and things are taken out. Honestly, the scenes that are taken out, other than a few Godzilla scenes, the only scene that really, as far as the human characters, there was two that were taken out that I really kind of miss, but I put back in, well, one of them I put back in my edited version that I did was there's a scene with Prime Minister after he talks to the Russian and Japanese or the American guys, where he's sitting in his room and one of his assistants lights a cigarette for him. And it's like, what'd you say to him? And he just kind of spills it all. It's like, I told him, what would happen if Godzilla shows up? I mean, they're wanting to nuke Japan. America and Russia are to stop Godzilla. Yeah. And he's like, what would you do if he showed up in your land? Could you nuke your own people? Could you do that? And to me, that was an amazingly performed scene. I mean, absolutely epic. Yeah. I missed that being in 85. The only other thing I really miss out in it not being in 85, that's in 84, as far as the human characters, is the loved story of Goro and Naoko. Purposefully
from beginning to end. From beginning to end. Yeah.
One main scene is when they go to leave the building. The helicopter shows up to take them from the building to get them to the island or the volcano to set up that device to lure Godzilla to the volcano. They get Professor Hayashida, and then they get Okumura out, or Ken, which I don't even. It doesn't bother me they call him Ken in the American version at all. But there's a scene in the Japanese one where Okumura realizes they're leaving, and Goro and Naoko are stuck in this building while a nuclear warhead is coming from space to blow up Godzilla, and Godzilla's still there. You know what I mean? Like, there's no hope of them surviving. But he looks at Goro and he's like, you've got to protect my sister. Like, that's all there is to it. And it's a great scene. But then the very next scene with them, she's patching up Goro's arm and she just breaks. She's just terrified. She's like, we're going to die. And they have this moment where he doesn't even really say anything. You know, after she says, I'm scared, he just kind of grabs her. And then she just hugs him. And there's just this awesome moment where she's like, she finally feels safe for a moment, knowing he's going to get her out of this, but they're still in the most devastating. They're facing Godzilla and a nuclear explosion all at once. You know, that scene I thought was missing from 85. But I mean, other than that, it made up for it with Raymond Burr, in my opinion. Now, Travis Swords' character, I really could have done without. I mean, he doesn't bother me. I've seen so many movies with worse characters, but like, you know, when they show the first scans of him attacking the sub, he's like, I saw we put a suit on him and sign him up. Like, come on, dude. Just, just
both of us were like, what? Like,
What is that all about?
yeah. It's like, I cannot stand that guy. But I mean, you know, Warren Himmerling, Warren Kimmerling, his actual name, in case you guys don't know, is Colonel Goodho is his name. I thought he was great. I mean, he did a really good job. He was very intense when he needed to be. I mean, there's moments where they're just kind of looking at the screen and he just is like, I mean, he was really good. James Hess was really good. He was the colonel, kind of like second command. I thought he did really good. The only line that made no sense to me, though, was when the general Goodho says, let's get the president on the phone to Moscow. And then James Hess's character says, down for repair. Really? Like he can't pick up a telephone from anywhere in the White House and call.
Down for repair.
That's like, that was bad writing. But to me, Raymond Burr, and of course, I've been a big Raymond Burr fan outside of Godzilla. Like I love the Matlock series, but like Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock is one of the greatest films ever made. Like you put James Stewart, and we all know James Stewart from It's a Wonderful Life and stuff like that. When you put him on film, you don't expect anybody to stand up to the caliber of acting that James Stewart does. When you watch Rear Window, there's points where you're like, James Stewart, you need to keep up with Raymond Burr. Like that is a phenomenal. The performances are unreal. And so I'm a big Burr fan. And I feel like Raymond, even when he wasn't speaking, just the look on his face was, even sometimes just the look on his face is like, these dudes are morons, especially Travis Swords. There's a couple of looks there that he gives Travis Swords as a character. I'm like, yes, he's an idiot. I felt Raymond Burr just delivered phenomenally. I mean, you know, we joked about the 8 hours. I don't think he needed more. I mean, I think he came in and just is like, this is it, and I'm going to kill it. And he freaking killed it. And it's just, it was phenomenal from beginning to end. For me, I love the movie. The choppiness, I honestly didn't bother me because it is choppy. I mean, I'll agree with Ruben and you guys. I mean, it is a choppy edit because they edited, again, so much. Like so many of these scenes are so out of place from the original Japanese version. It's unreal, which is really what makes it.
And honestly, you know, I maybe would not have noticed the choppiness if I hadn't watched 84.
Oh yeah, I don't think. I mean, you wouldn't.
Like,
I really don't think because
I think I wouldn't have noticed and it wouldn't have bothered me. But
because it's edited.
That's why when
it's edited like a 1980s action flick from America. I mean, really with a lot of horror tones. And adding the soundtrack from DEFCON 4 and taking out some of the soundtrack from the 85 or the 84 film, especially the Goodbye Godzilla song, really gave it a more horror undertone. Like this, to me, is definitely the darkest Godzilla film there is, as far as the overall tone of the movie, which is probably one of the reasons why I like it too, because I'm such a horror fanatic. So to me, I mean, the only two negatives on both sides, the giant foot and the soundtrack, lack of soundtrack on the Japanese side, Travis Swords on the right. That's really it. Other than that, I mean, I love both of these films. There's so many things I like about these films. 85 takes the candle for me because I mean, obviously it's my first. Obviously, it's super nostalgic for me. But I mean, it's to me, like Mark was saying. I mean, it was the best Godzilla film. It is the best Godzilla film up until the new King of the Monsters, which Mark likes more. But to me, the key to it was Raymond Burr. Man, was just huge for me because he delivered the lines that I felt were needed to carry the American scenes. Because if you didn't have him in there, this would have been a tragic film. I don't think you had him. I mean, and the biggest thing too is that, I mean, like his speech at the end. We joke around. Mark was here earlier, and I'm going to show you guys how much I know this freaking movie. Here you go. You guys ready?
Do it, man. It's time.
Okay. Nature has a way sometimes of reminding us of just how small he really is. She occasionally throws up the terrible offspring of our pride and carelessness to remind us of how puny we really are, whether in the face of a tornado, an earthquake, or a Godzilla. The reckless ambitions of man are often dwarfed by their dangerous consequences. For now, Godzilla, that strangely innocent and tragic monster, has gone to Earth. Whether or not he returns, or if he'll ever be seen again, the things he has taught us remains.
There you go. There you go. There it is.
There you go.
All right, it's my turn. You ready?
Yep.
You ready? Here you go.
Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Nice.
It's not a story the Jedi would tell you.
We're watching the movie because I'm sitting last night. I watched the American version with and my wife was sitting on the couch, and she kept looking at me like, "You're ridiculous," because I would keep quoting the lines before they would happen. I was telling Mark outside, it's like, if I'm really good, I could get Dr. Hayashida's or Professor Hayashida's speech in the American film, and I nailed it outside pretty close, I think, to it. Like, I mean, this movie, dude, I know it word for word. Generically word for word, because to me, it's huge. It's huge. I mean, you've got three major staples in the Godzilla fan. If you could pick three films that put the whole series together, or the tri-pinnacle, or whatever you would say, of the Godzilla series, to me, it's the original 54, Japanese version, 85, and then 2014. To me, those are the three top dogs as far as what carried this, because this restarted the series and in a huge
I
way.
agree 100% on that. Yeah. Yes.
So if I would say something about that, well, I didn't compare it to 2014, but I compared it to Shin. So I said because I feel like this is one of the few, and correct me if I'm wrong, and of course we're not counting 98, where it's just Godzilla versus the world.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It really is. You're right.
So it's you have the original, you have 85, and you have Shin. I believe those are the only three where it's Godzilla versus the world.
Oh,
because
man.
even 2014, you have the Mutos.
And I would like to say too, when it comes to those three, because you are right. Yeah, that's right. It would be 54, this one, and then Shin Godzilla. But I thought Japanese version or American version didn't matter as far as what I'm about to say for this movie. I thought the fight sequences between the Japanese Defense Force, including the scene with Super X and Godzilla in this film, were the best of any of the Godzilla films. Like, they were just absolutely top notch. I think better than Shin, and I even think, as far as the attacks on, between the two of them, better than the original. Like, I just felt like in the original one, of course, I mean, Godzilla was so huge and overpowering that I felt when they were firing their tanks, it's like, this is just stupid and pointless. Like, you're wasting your time. Yeah. But I feel like the fights in this one between the Japanese Defense Force, the Super X, and Godzilla was just awesome. I'm like, I felt like the mech fight between, because that's what Super X is a mech, pretty much, was better than pretty much any other mech fight in Godzilla, period. I mean, I loved it. I mean, it was just intense through the city. I mean, it was as entertaining to me as watching Godzilla fight the 74 Mechagodzilla. Like, I thought it was absolutely great.
Okay, okay, yeah. So I want to follow up with that. I mean, I disagree. So when I compared it, when I said 54, 85 and 84, 85 and Shin, I thought, in my opinion, 85 didn't do the best job in comparison to those in a sort of Godzilla versus the world movie. And like, I mean, I see what you're saying. You're right. The Super X was pretty cool, but like, in this film, it didn't do much for me. It kind of just felt like it was kind of like a Mechagodzilla in a box, and that kind of gets at what you were saying. But it's kind of like in those like, and I bring it up because you just said that you liked it more than versus any mech fight. So that would include any Mechagodzilla fight, correct?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would, to me personally, because, and I do it for two reasons. It is, to me, the best mech fight. So I mean, between this and this fight against Super X2, against Super X3, which I didn't really see that as a fight, more just Super X3 trying to.
So are you counting the Mechagodzilla 2 fight?
Yeah. I'm counting them all, because there was something about those fights, especially Mechagodzilla 2, because Mechagodzilla 2 is arguably one of the best films of the Heisei series. But when you get to that point, it kind of has that same formula as every other monster fight. And so while, yes, it's absolutely amazing, it's kind of the same formula I have saw 25 films prior. With the Super X fight in this one, and this is how I take these things, I mean, it was no holds barred. There, I mean, at the beginning, it's I'm attacking you and you've got to die. I mean, it was just the gloves were off type deal. And they were fighting, both sides were fighting for their lives.
It was the first time you saw that kind of, besides the Mechagodzilla, where the world, I'll use RJ's term, the world had that kind of firepower.
Right. Yeah. And to me, when Godzilla wakes up, I have never, just for me personally, I have never, except for maybe King of the Monsters when it comes to Ghidorah in the newer one. I mean, when Godzilla gets up, dude, that's all he cares about. He doesn't, I mean, he has got to, I mean, he just looks evil and wants to wreak all absolute vengeance. I mean, throwing that building on top of it, it's like he could have blown it up with his ray or stuff, but no, he had to make sure it felt pain. I mean, to me, it's like, that's all he knew. This thing has got to feel pain and die.
That was, you know what? That's one of the coolest scenes in the movie.
I'll give it that.
Yeah, I forgot about you mentioned that. That is one of the coolest scenes because he just says, I'm just going to drop this building on you. And just drops it.
Oh, it's amazing. And so
that is awesome.
For me, that's why. I mean, a lot of people will. I have no doubts. A lot of people will disagree with me on it, and that's totally fine. Everyone loves their favorite mega sites, but because of the way that this fight was, the way it was handled, I mean, just Godzilla's just, I mean, 150%.
Well, this was like I said. I think you're right. You've kind of changed my mind a little bit. Because this is the first time Godzilla. I mean, he's been challenged by aliens and other monsters, but this is the first time that we as humans actually had a shot at defeating him. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, we actually had a shot. Now, whether or not, how the story played out as well, he's knocked out and he's lying there and they don't know if he's going to get up or not. And then, of course, depending on which version of the film you watch, either Russian accidentally sent that.
Right. Yeah. Or did it on purpose.
That's a huge. They either did it on purpose or it was an accident. I prefer the Japanese version where it was a pure accident.
I do too.
Of course, the American
they got a little
version,
too.
But I grew up in the Cold War and all that stuff going on, and I can see Russians are the bad guys. So had that not happened, maybe Super X would have defeated him. We won't never know, of course.
Right.
They'd have to change the story around, but the more I think about it, you might have convinced me there that was a pretty cool. I mean, they had him on the ropes. He was
did.
Knocked out.
I mean,
that way.
And
now,
when
whether he gets up on a 10 count, we don't know now. But they had him on the ropes.
I mean, and when you look at Super X in comparison to Godzilla, it's the smallest foe he's ever fought in all 31 films.
Yeah.
He's never fought a foe as small, nowhere even close. But yet, that thing was able to go toe-to-toe to him, and that entire last fight sequence, both of them, was as entertaining at the least as any other monster he's ever fought. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that, to me,
it's a bold statement.
It's a bold statement, yeah.
I mean, I understand that, you feel that way, that's your opinion, but I don't know. I just, I feel like as y'all talk about it, I'm like, did I miss something? Because I don't know. I wasn't like, oh yeah, Super X. Like, it was just kind of like, oh, it's a little flying spaceship and it happens to be really powerful. But I don't know. I guess it's just me. That's my perception.
No, yeah, definitely. and it's totally cool. I mean, Alex, no one's going to agree. And of course, I mean, you've seen Star Wars Episode 3 too many times to, get a clear view.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to put that into perspective. I'm like, I don't know. Like it really is. It's just a matter of taste, and I think it's really important on when you saw it as well.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Because like I said, I probably definitely see Episode 3 through a lens of nostalgia as well. You know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, I see all the prequels, I guess.
I tried to explain that to them, RJ.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
They didn't want to hear it.
But at the same time, it's hard to. It's hard because I don't want to say it's simply nostalgia because I honestly believe it's a great film, but I know it plays a part. You know what I mean? So
it does.
Sorry,
I mean,
now I know we're getting into like film viewing philosophy, but like still, like
right. Well, no, and it does. I mean, when you view a film, especially when we're talking about this one, I mean, RJ, you're just now viewing it again, kind of for the first time again, right? But for me, this was the first time when I was like 5 or 6. So I mean, this was my first experience.
That has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Yes, me. And I've thrown that nostalgia word around a lot in a lot of our shows.
Yeah, rose tint. You watching it with like rose tint glasses. You know what I mean? But
then
again, you want to be fair to the film itself. You know that because I feel like saying that sometimes can just discredit a person's opinion. Yeah. Like, but because obviously some stuff just didn't click with me here, but that doesn't mean it's a bad or terrible film. You know what I mean? So
what a good example is? I'll bring it up. RJ's taking a class right now.
Yeah.
And the class is taken is film.
It's called Religion, Film, and Values, and we recently watched The Exorcist. And I love The Exorcist. It's an amazing horror film. It's extremely Catholic. Like I love it. You know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
A friend of mine watched it and he texted me. He said, as he was watching it, he said, "This film is so lame and so boring." And I got so upset. I was like, what? I was like, what? How can you watch The Exorcist and say, yeah, this is lame and boring and not scary? Because like I watch it and I'm like scared every time, and I think it's a masterful piece of art. But this person is just not enjoying it as much as I am, and it makes me upset. So,
Well, see, and then but
yeah.
he's probably so from him, and so it's same case in point here. And I know listeners are probably like, what where do we go? We're going into film philosophies where we're at here because this movie brings it out in you. So your friend, he's probably went and seen The Exorcism of Emily Rose or Sinister. So these are way before he ever saw Exorcist, where you've seen Exorcist before
That's
any
true.
of those films. You know what I mean? So for me, this, like in this case point, Super X fight was the first Godzilla mech fight I ever saw. But you've probably seen, the Godzilla versus Meg Godzilla first, or it is all what you see, how you see, when you see it. So yes, I mean,
I mean, that makes sense that because I mean, my favorite is like, I love like, Tokyo SOS and Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 3, subtitle. And so when I compare it to that, it's like, I mean, what am I going to choose? 85 or Tokyo SOS? You know what I mean? So it's like, that's how I see it. But you're right. Yeah. So.
And SOS is awesome.
It's fascinating.
SOS was like
fascinating how everybody sees it differently.
Sorry, my concentration's in philosophy, so I always think about people's perception and things, especially when it comes to art and media. So it's gonna come up naturally. But
oh no, dude, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I remember I was just talking to Pete the other day. He watched a movie called Exists that I'm a huge fan of. It's a Bigfoot found footage horror film, and he saw the ending completely different than the way that I did. And then when I was like, well, this is how I saw the ending. And he was like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. So everyone's perception is phenomenal. When you go to look at movies, Donnie Darko, when it comes to film perception, is always one of my go-tos because I can watch that film with 3 completely different storylines. Same movie, nothing changes, but I can see it in 3 totally different lights. And so the perception is phenomenal for anything. And that's key for this one, especially in a scenario like this when you've got the Japanese version versus the American one. And when you see it, I mean, it could be if you're used to modern American cinema and even modern Japanese cinema, and then you see this severely edited film.
And you hit the nail on the head with the horror movies. I notice some people, if it doesn't have gore and all kinds of violence, it's just not a good horror movie. And I'm not about I know RJ isn't about that. I'm not about that. I want to be scared.
I
want to be sitting in my seat and I want to go to bed and be thinking about it and saying, I want to go to bed and hear a noise and be scared because I just watched that movie.
Not because
because
you send 14 jump scares in 3 seconds at me. You know what I mean? Like, so
I want to be, I want to be in bed and hear a noise and be scared. Like, oh my God, what is that?
Oh yeah.
And I think being scared,
it's a thing, and the Godzilla movies are the same thing. That's we all know this as Godzilla fans. There's fans out there that unless it's nonstop monster action from beginning to end, it's just a terrible movie.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you got some people say, oh, it lacks a story. They want a whole story, and you can never make a Godzilla fan base happy across the board. There's just no way. It's not
dude,
it's amongst Godzilla fans. It's
I mean, it's the only fan base that I think is worse than the Star Wars fan base. It's the only one.
Yeah, honestly, it's for me at least. It's Star Wars fans. Then I would put metal fans because metal fans can be pretty bad in regards to their pickiness and what they want. And then
that's true.
And then probably Godzilla fans.
I mean, great movie. Whichever one you watch, you're gonna have fun watching it. I mean, even in Ruben or RJ's case, I mean, he didn't like as much on this one. It's still a Godzilla film. You know what I mean? So I would still watch it. So. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's there's definitely if this is one that you may not like, there's definitely a whole lot worse out there. Godzilla 98. Godzilla
100.
You know what I mean?
But I mean, I would say this: for as much as negative I went on 85 and versus Return, either one of those movies would make me happy. If I wanted to watch either one of them, I would not be disappointed. Like Like if I went to somebody's house, he goes, "Oh, which one would you, which one your prefer?" I'd say, "Don't matter to me, man. Throw either one on. I'm gonna enjoy it."
Yeah. There's there's so
and it's a
many
lot of fun. Yeah.
amazing Godzilla moments in this film. I mean, one of the ones that like RJ you mentioned was a flaw, in which I'll agree the scaling was off on that. But like his first appearance at the nuclear power plant, when that guy falls down and the camera goes up from Godzilla's feet to his face, that was, I mean, scale or not, in my opinion, that was probably one of the greatest entrances of Godzilla ever. I mean, that was just like, oh, I mean, because we've never
that part was correct. They used the blue screen. It was obvious on one and the first 3 seconds of that appearance, and then it went to when the camera pans up.
Oh yeah, okay,
then it goes back to that was done perfectly. I agree with you,
man. It's just like,
but even RJ pointed it. I didn't even notice until RJ said, "That doesn't look right." And then I kind of looked at it again. I'm like, "You're right." I said, "That's a blue screen that they used," which kind of threw things off. Yeah. But the actual camera angle where it sweeps up, and he's looking straight up at Godzilla. That's, and even in that other scene where they're hiding behind that rock, where they escape the building and they're hiding behind that.
Oh
building,
yeah.
And he's
his
right
foot
over
comes
them.
down.
Yeah, that was right over them.
That was that's very reminiscent of. I thought when I watched it was King of the Monsters and all the. I love how in King of the Monsters they show the action from the person's point of view. Like when it's I'm bad for saying it's honestly one of my favorite Godzilla movies, but when it's Millie Bobby Brown character and King Ghidorah and Godzilla are fighting right above her, and it's just like you feel like you're watching it. It's awesome. So that kind of reminded me. That scene reminded me of that too. Yeah,
it's so. I mean, there's that. There's just with the American acting aside, whatever. I mean, this one has just some epic Godzilla moments, especially that end. I mean, like RJ was saying, whether you're watching the Japanese version or the American version with Raymond's speech, it's such a tragic ending that you go through with this monster and this destruction, and then with the end, you're like, oh my god! I mean, you're ready to weep.
That ending is on par with like Destroyer, which was supposed to be the end of an era.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Godzilla versus Destroyer, which is supposed to be the end of an era. There, that ending is on par with that.
Yeah,
I think.
I would say
I agree.
Sad too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so you guys got anything else? We'll go to the stomp ratings.
We can do the stomp ratings.
Well, I just want to. I hope I didn't. I don't want to ruin anybody's enjoyment of this film. This is how I, perceive the film. I don't want to come off as like a jerk or whatever.
It didn't stop Mark on shit.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what.
I don't want to. I know how it feels to. Like I said, I know how it feels to have something you really like to be completely trash for somebody else, like with the Exorcist
no,
Revenge
man,
of the Sith or whatever. So I don't want to. I don't want to be that guy. You can enjoy whatever you want. We enjoyed it differently. That's all I want to say. But
no.
Back on the show. Thank you.
RJ, totally fine because you give that opposite. Because if you let just me run with this film and nobody else, I'm gonna paint this film like the greatest movie of all time. Because and I will defend it to the end. But then you need that opposite too on anything, saying, okay, let's bring it back down to earth a little bit. Here's these issues. Just like we talk about, and I will always give Revenge of the Sith a hard time because of Hayden Christensen screaming no, he took to me the galaxy's greatest bad guy and made him the greatest pansy in 30 seconds flat. I couldn't stand it.
He just lost his woman.
Wait a minute. Hold on. I think you said Hayden Christensen says no. I'm pretty sure that's not him that says no. Wouldn't it be the original voice of Darth Vader, James Earl Jones?
Uh-oh.
What?
When he says
James
no?
did it. No, I thought it was Christian. Whoever did it.
Because that's not Hayden Christensen's voice.
Well, whoever did it ruined it right there. Okay, that scene.
He just said James Earl Jones was a terrible actor. Dang, did you just say that James Earl Jones was a terrible actor?
I'm gonna yell at James for it.
Mark,
it just
Mark,
that
did you
scene.
hear that, Mark?
I'm listening to you.
Yeah, that scene was horrible. To me, that was just so bad. But when I go and look at Revenge of the Sith, though, there are so many things that are actually phenomenal about the movie. The fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin, to me, that is the greatest fight in Star Wars history. Period.
Well, I'm glad you agree. I didn't think you'd say that. So that's
everything else about the movie, Samuel Jackson.
I'll take it.
Really got cut to the curb, but yes, the one, and I've said this before in the show, the previous show, I think Ruben, you can test for this. The best line in Hayden Christensen's career as Anakin was the "I hate you" line in that fight scene. That was the first time and only time I ever once thought, okay, the dude can act. That was just me personally. But even then, like there's a lot of negatives that I could point out, but there's still some good that I will definitely point out. But you got to have those opposites and it makes things interesting and the discussion better. So
I know this is not Godzilla related, but how would you fix that scene with the scene that you hate, that you don't like? How would you change? Like, if you're the director, what would you tell him? How would you end it? I guess.
Okay.
Synopsis.
This is how I would end
curious.
it. Okay, are you ready? Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
He gets the mask put on, and then he asks where Padme is, and the Emperor says, "You killed her." I would have had Hayden or whoever come out of that chair, grab the Emperor by the throat, and say, "No, I didn't kill her." Like in just a low, just mad, but on the verge of crying tone. "No, I didn't kill her." And then the Emperor does the Jedi mind trick, or however you would do it, touches him on the head and puts in his memory or in his mind him killing her. And then he just falls, takes off the mask, and then his deformed face, you just see one tear come out of the right of his eye. Boom, credits.
Well, you thought about this before.
Nope, that was
It
literally
seems that
just
someone has asked you this
off the
question
cuff right there. I promise you that was off the cuff.
So him crying is less wimpy than him yelling no?
No, not crying. One tear. Just one. Because you can still be freaking bad as all get out. And you are allowed one tear. That's it. More than that, then no, you're a big sissy when it comes to those movies.
Wow.
I mean, I probably would have enjoyed that ending as well, but that's a conversation.
I remember talking about this over and over again and saying I wanted to end with him putting his mask on.
Yeah,
they would have just ended it there. I didn't need to know how upset he was about Padme. I didn't need to know that.
Yeah.
They could have cut that out and been fine.
Rise, Lord Vader, and then the theme song starts playing. Credits roll in the movie. That's it.
Even if it had just cut from him getting the suit put on to the very last scene where he's looking at the Death Star with his arms crossed.
Yeah,
that would have been cool.
That would have been the answer right there. I don't need to know. I don't need to know. I don't need to know because once he becomes Darth Vader, he becomes emotionless, and he shouldn't have any emotion.
Then Ruben, when you look there, he comes Darth Vader. Like what I was saying there a minute, he takes the mask off and drops the one tear. The tear is the last of his emotion. All gone. It all ends right there.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's good. That's good.
We're gonna have to reshoot that.
Yeah. We'll have to get our high budget of $45.
Yeah.
If y'all ever do an episode, or I don't know if y'all have already done a Revenge of the Sith
did a
episode.
Star Wars.
Oh, you did a Star Wars episode? Okay, well, Repcon it. Now I'm coming back in. I'm just kidding.
So all right. So, so Stomp rating. Both movies, man, honestly, across the board. I mean, because they was pretty varied as far as, the ratings. I mean, RJ definitely gave this the lowest. I gave it the highest, and you and Mark and Ruben were kind of in between. Both movies came out with a 4. 85 came out technically with a 3.75, but we've been doing the whole rounding deal to try and keep it smooth.
Yeah, it's a 4.
So 4.
And I think a 4 on both of them would be, average. Would be.
I think that's above average.
Yeah, it's above average.
Yeah.
I mean, I call it above average.
Yeah, I mean, they're not perfect
I'd
films.
watch that over Godzilla's Revenge. I'd watch it over Godzilla's Revenge any day of the week.
Oh man, I'd watch it over. And of course, this is just me. I mean, because I gave it 5s. I won't lie. Gave both films 5s. I would watch this over any other Godzilla film other than the original, like more than any other one. Like, but that's it. That's me. This is nostalgic wise.
And the only difference between me and Sludge is I gave Return to 5, and I gave the 4
85 to 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
85.
Yeah.
That's the only difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just flipped. Oh, he gave them both 5s, and I had to. One. I thought one was better than the other, so that's the only reason I did that.
All right. Well, there it is, man. So you guys heard it. So 4 across the board from us. You got to hear it from a good spectrum. I mean, from the very negative side to the very positive side. A lot went into this movie. There's a lot that happens between both films that makes a difference. Very different movies. I mean, of course, this movie has achieved cult status at this point on both sides of the fence, being the Japanese version and the American version. But a fun movie, man. If you've not seen this one, definitely recommend checking it out. It is kind of, unless you don't have a VHS, going to be harder to find the 85 version nowadays, unfortunately. It doesn't get played on TV at all. It is easier, which is weird to say right now, but it is easier to pick up a copy of Godzilla 1984 here in America than it is to get 1985.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Crazy, right? That's crazy.
Very, very odd. So, but I mean,
But you can go on to, you can go on to that Internet Archive site, and Red Menace has got a pretty good.
That's right.
That's the one we saw. Yeah.
Yep. So if you go to archive.org, they've got a lot of, millions of videos on there. But you can find Godzilla 1985 on archive.org and watch from there. And check it out. I mean, it's fun. Both of them are great movies. Both of them have their flaws, but both just fun Godzilla films. They kickstarted an era and brought Godzilla back to popularity again, and a lot of other monster genres. So, but there you go, man. We'll have to wrap this up because if you leave it to Sludge, I could talk about this movie all night long, and we don't want to do that. So,
yeah, you're right. We can go 3 hours on this easy.
Oh, I could, man. I could. There were so many other details about like the production of this film and stuff that I just didn't even get into.
Yeah, he could just keep going and going and going.
Oh man, this is it. This is Sludge's film. So, man, thank you guys so much for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, thank you to RJ for jumping in with us on this film again. We appreciate that a lot. And thank you for letting me give you a hard time about Star Wars Episode 3.
Thank you for letting me critique your favorite Godzilla film, man.
Hey, not a
I didn't know going in that I was going to be critiquing your favorite Godzilla film, but
oh no, it's all right, man. I appreciate it. I like getting the negative side of things, except for Ship of Monsters when Mark just was totally wrong on that.
Why is it that I trash a movie and I am still catching it? RJ, they didn't even tell you what you rated the thing. Oh, I don't know. There's something wrong with that.
All right. So guys, definitely hope you enjoyed it. Of course, now next episode this month will be, hey Mark, look, you hated Ship of Monsters, but we're giving you
time for the legend.
We're giving you the Legend of Boggy Creek. So which is very fun, mockumentary, Bigfoot movie from the 70s. I think maybe my first Bigfoot film I ever saw was this one. So it again because of Mark, so it's going to be tons of fun.
One of the best bathroom scenes
ever.
Movies.
I love it, man. I think the only better bathroom scene is probably the one from Bad Milo, but that's totally not a Bigfoot movie at all. So. But anyway, so again, thank you guys so much. This is Sludge
and Mark.
Oh, and RJ.
And it's Ruben over here right next to him.
Y'all have a good night.
The flesh wound. I am the father.